In January 2025, workers at one of America's most classified defense facilities watched something cross the sky that the government has never explained. The object flew directly over Lockheed Martin's Colorado campus, a site that produces some of the most advanced weapons systems on the planet. The Lockheed Martin facility in Littleton, Colorado, is not a typical corporate campus. It houses classified satellite programs, space weapons systems, and defense contracts the Pentagon doesn't discuss publicly. When something starts operating in its airspace at night, that's not a routine security concern. That's a national security event. What we're walking through today isn't speculation. We'll examine what witnesses saw, what the government said, and, more critically, what the government carefully avoided saying. By the end, we'll arrive at the only honest question this case leaves open: who had the capability to do this? December 2024 changed the American public's relationship with drones. Starting in New Jersey, hundreds of verified reports flooded in. Large, unidentified aerial objects operating at night, larger than commercial drones, silent when they shouldn't be, performing maneuvers that consumer hardware simply can't execute. The FAA opened inquiries. The FBI got involved. By early January 2025, the wave had moved into Colorado. Multiple counties reported sightings across several consecutive nights. But the reports that stood out weren't over open farmland or highways. They were concentrated near defense infrastructure, military bases, federal facilities, and one contractor site most Americans have never heard of. Lockheed Martin's Littleton campus sits at the edge of the Front Range, south of Denver. This is the headquarters of their Space Systems Division, the program behind the X-37B military space plane, classified satellite systems for the National Reconnaissance Office, and propulsion research that doesn't appear in any public filing. In the second week of January, employees arriving for night shifts reported large drone-like objects near the facility perimeter. Multiple witnesses estimated the craft at 8 to 15 feet across. They produced no sound consistent with rotors of that size. They held position against the wind, and they watched. The witnesses weren't civilians driving past on the highway. They were engineers and cleared security personnel who know what aircraft look like and sound like. Several filed internal incident reports. Others contacted local news. One detail appeared across every account. The objects weren't drifting. They were deliberate. Lockheed Martin issued no public statement. Their communications team declined every interview request. In corporate crisis management, that level of silence is a protocol, not an oversight. Defense contractors operating classified programs have strict security procedures for incidents, so the absence of any public acknowledgement almost certainly means they were told not to speak. The FAA acknowledged elevated drone activity across Colorado during this period, but attributed most sightings to commercial operators, hobby flyers, and law enforcement assets. That explanation has a significant structural problem. Littleton sits inside restricted airspace, adjacent to Buckley Space Force Base. Unauthorized drone flight, there is a federal felony. Nobody was charged with anything. The Department of Homeland Security issued a carefully worded statement. There was, quote, "no evidence of a foreign adversary operating drones in restricted airspace." Read that sentence carefully. It doesn't say the objects were identified. It doesn't say the reports were false. It says they couldn't confirm a foreign source. Those are very different claims. That same formulation was deployed repeatedly across the entire wave. New Jersey, Colorado, Virginia, Montana. Not. These were hobbyists. Not. We identified the aircraft. Just. No confirmed adversary, which still leaves a very uncomfortable set of possibilities on the table, and the government knows exactly what those possibilities are. Congress was already in motion. The 2025 National Defense Authorization Act included specific provisions requiring the Department of Defense to investigate and report UAP incursions over defense contractor facilities. The Lockheed sightings occurred while those provisions were being finalized. Members of the relevant oversight committees noted the timing explicitly. Representative Mike Garcia, a Navy veteran on the House Armed Services Committee, called the Colorado sightings a serious national security concern and pressed for classified briefings. Those briefings were delivered. What was discussed inside those rooms has not entered the public record. The committees received it. Congress acknowledged it. Nothing came out. The question aerospace analysts returned to repeatedly: who has the operational capability to run large, radar-quiet drone platforms over American airspace in coordinated patterns, hovering over classified facilities, avoiding interception, leaving no physical trace? The list of entities with that capability is very short. The options on that list are all uncomfortable. A foreign adversary operating at that level inside the continental United States, persistent, coordinated, and undetected, would represent an act bordering on war. Defense analysts who spoke publicly called a Chinese or Russian state program extremely unlikely but not dismissible. The alternative, that these were American origin platforms, raises its own uncomfortable questions. The Colorado sightings weren't isolated. Between December 2024 and February 2025, sensitive defense locations across the country reported nearly identical incursions. Malmstrom Air Force Base, Langley, Picatinny Arsenal, large objects, night operations, no transponder signals, hovering near hardened assets, then departure, leaving no physical trace and no intercept. F-22s were scrambled at least twice during this period. In both cases, pilots reported visual contact before the objects disappeared. Not jamming, not evasion maneuvering. They simply vanished from tracking. Either they departed faster than an F-22 can follow, or, once the intercept was initiated, they couldn't be tracked at all. Here's what the record actually confirms. The objects were real. Documented by credible professionals at secured facilities, the government acknowledged incursions without identifying a source. Military assets failed to produce any intercept result. Congress received classified briefings whose contents remain sealed. The question isn't whether something happened. It's what the briefing said. There's one detail from the Colorado wave that got almost no media attention. A researcher tracking sighting reports noted a spatial correlation between the highest density clusters and the locations of underground aquifer systems along the Front Range. A strange observation, but it echoed patterns documented in other UAP hotspot clusters going back decades. The correlation isn't claimed as proof of anything, but it's the kind of anomaly that appears in ARRO's working analysis. The documented relationship between UAP activity, geography, and critical infrastructure. The Lockheed sightings sit directly inside that pattern. The agency has acknowledged studying it. They haven't yet explained it. In January 2025, something operated above one of America's most classified facilities. Engineers documented it. Security personnel filed reports. Congress demanded answers. The government confirmed the incursions and declined to identify the source. More than a year later, no public explanation has been offered. That sustained silence is its own kind of answer. What's your read on this? A foreign intelligence operation that got too close to exposure? A classified domestic program being tested in plain sight? Or something that doesn't fit either category? Drop your analysis in the comments. Cases like this need serious debate, and the best thinking usually comes from people watching closely. If you want investigations like this, real evidence, credible witnesses, questions nobody else is asking, subscribe. We go deep every week.